guys, bienvenidos a mi canal. One of my subscribers asked me to make a video on how to make a simple crossbody cell phone bag. After a couple mock-ups and designs, I came up with this design, which is relatively easy to make. I made 3 printable patterns, which will be linked down below in the description box for you to be able to print them out and make this bag. And this video will show you step by step on how to make this bag. So here we go. So the first thing you'll need is to print out the pattern templates, which are completely free for you to print out on my website. Just click the first link below in the description box and it will direct you to this page. Then click on the rectangle box that says click here for PDF download. A page like this should appear where you can click on the printer icon to print. And if you have a wireless printer, you can do this also from your phone, which are the exact same steps on a computer. I do want to make clear that I designed this bag to fit a Huawei Honor 8X phone because that's the type of phone she has. So if you want to change the dimensions of the bag, do that before cutting onto the fabric. Once you're done cutting the templates out, make sure to cut out all the notches with a notch maker or with your scissors. And you'll know where to make a notch when you see this small dashed line. You will notice that 2 pattern pieces have a black dot, which one pattern piece is labeled front of bag and the other one is labeled back of tab. With an awl, I poke through the dot to make a hole, but if you don't have an awl, just use a pencil to poke through. For this project, you will need fusible fleece, in which I purchased at Joann's. On one side, you'll notice there's white dots, which gives a rough feel. That's the adhesive side. And the other side is smooth and fluffy, which is the side I trace the patterns on with a permanent marker. The 2 patterns that you'll have to trace twice are the fusible fleece of bag and the fusible fleece of tab. After tracing the pieces, go ahead and cut the pieces out. You should have 2 of the fusible fleece of bag and 2 of the fusible fleece of tab. I will be using this satin fabric as my lining and this lilac and gray jacquard fabric as the outer fabric. First, I will be cutting the outer fabric pieces, so I place the right side of the fabric downwards and have the selvage edge vertically on the left side like this. The pieces that I will be cutting on this fabric are the front of bag, back of tab, front of tab, and the crossbody strap. I place the front and back pattern pieces of the bag and tab on the fabric, and I make sure the grain line arrow of the pieces are parallel to the selvage edge. I do this by aligning the ruler to the selvage edge and to the grain line arrows on the pieces. I place a heavy object on top of the pieces that I trace, and I make sure to mark all the notches and holes. Now, you can cut these 4 pieces and cut a slit on the marked notches. Next, we're going to trace the crossbody strap. You can do this by using the paper template that you cut earlier, or if you have a ruler like mine that's 2 inches wide, you can preferably use that. This strap has to be cut on the bias of the fabric, so from the middle top of the fabric, I will slant the ruler at about a 45-degree angle and trace the edges of the ruler until I get to 46 inches of length. After tracing to that length, go ahead and cut the strap. Now we move on to the lining. Trace the front and back of lining pattern pieces on the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure the grain line arrows are parallel to the selvage edge and remember to mark all the notches. And finally, cut the pieces. Next, on these 4 pieces, we're going to iron the fusible fleece on the wrong side of the fabric. Make sure that the rough part with the adhesive side of the fleece is facing towards the wrong side of the fabric. And you want to place the fleece in the center, leaving ½ an inch on all sides. We're going to prep our crossbody strap by ironing it in half all the way through to the other end. Then we're going to fold the bottom half to the middle crease. Once you're done ironing that to the end, go ahead and do the same to the other side. Now you can fold the sides together and iron them nicely on that final fold. At the end, your crossbody strap should look like this, and it's ready to be sewn on that opening edge. Now we can finally start sewing. To sew the strap, I move the needle to the right to safely sew close to the edge of the strap. After sewing this part, it should look something like this. If yours curled up like mine did, by ironing it flat, it should remove the twisting. Furthermore, we will be sewing the back and front of the outer fabric together. Make sure the side notches match each other before you sew. The seam allowance is 1/2 inch and you will be sewing all sides except the top side where there's no curves. After carefully sewing these two pieces together, cut 1/4 inch from the seam allowance all around except the top side. And you should have something like this. And now on the round corners, we will have to cut 2 triangular cuts on the seam allowance. But make sure that the cuts don't surpass the stitched lines. We are doing this around the corners, so when we turn this inside out, it will give us a smooth and unbulky round corners. And once you're done cutting down the edges and doing the rectangular cuts, go ahead and turn this inside out. Alrighty, so for the closure of this bag, we're going to use these sew on snap buttons, and we're going to sew the thicker one onto the front side of the bag, where the dot marking is located. First, I stitch on the middle of the dot. Second, I hold the button on the middle of the dot while I stitch back and forth through the slit holes on this button. And I do 2 rounds all the way around to have it secured. At the end, remember to secure the thread by stitching across in the back like this, and then make a little knot. Snip the thread and your button should look somewhat like this. Now on to sewing the back and front tabs together. Make sure the 2 notches align together on each side. You're going to have 1/2 inch as seam allowance, and you're going to sew from the right side, then all the way around the curve and onto the left side. Do not sew the top side of the tab since we need that opening. Next, we're going to cut 1/4 inch of the seam allowance all around except the top side of the tab where the opening is. Then we're going to make 3 triangular cuts around the curved edge, but make sure you do not cut over the stitch line when you do this. Now this will be a little difficult but not impossible. You're going to have to turn the inside of the tab out. Be gentle with pulling and pushing as you don't want the seams to rip. Once I had half of the inside out, I used the end of a pen to push the outside in, so I hope that helps you out a bit. And now your tab should look somewhat like this. And on we go to the next step. Take the other side of the snap-on button and sew the button on the middle of the dot that we marked on the back tab. You stitch back and forth through the slit holes similar to what we did with the first button, only that this time you will be trying your best to hide the thread on the outside of the fabric since it will be difficult to sew from the inside of the tab. Now that we got these 2 pieces, we're going to sew the tab to the bag. You see these 2 notches at the top of the back side? That's where the tab will be placed at. So flip the bag to the back side and place the tab in between these 2 top notches. And you want the button on the tab facing towards you. So the seam allowance for this part is 3/8 inch. And be cautious to not sew on the front side of the bag. Once you're done with this part, it should look like this. It's time to attach the crossbody strap to the bag. Try your very best to place the strap right in the middle of the side seams, and make sure that the strap is not twisted in the middle so you can get the best results. I kept a 3/8 inch as the seam allowance on both sides, and they should function like this. Alrighty, so now we're going to attach the front and back lining by having the right sides of the fabric facing each other. First, we're going to stitch this little section, and then don't stitch this section because we need it open, and then continue stitching all the way around from the second notch. Oh, and when you're sewing, make sure to have a 1/2 inch as the seam allowance. And use the slit notches as a guide of where the 2 pieces should meet at. Once you're done sewing, you're going to cut off 1/4 of an inch from the seam allowance, but only the sections that you sewed on. Next, cut 3 triangles around the 2 round corners to avoid bulkiness on the edges. Now, carefully pull the lining inside out and you'll notice that the section that you didn't sew is going to be poking out. So tuck that seam allowance in and iron all the edges and wrinkles. Alright, finally we are getting to the part of attaching the lining to the bag. In order to do that, we pull the inside out of the bag and tuck all the components inside the bag. Without doing anything to the lining, go ahead and insert that in the bag while aligning the 2 back notches together and also matching the lining and bag seams together. Sew all around the top of these 2 layers with 1/2 of an inch of seam allowance, and make sure all the notches and seams are aligned. Now, through the opening slit of the lining, we're going to insert the footer inside. And on the seam of the lining, we're going to do 1/8 of an inch all around. This sewing step is called the understitch because it helps the lining to stay inside the outer shell. And it leaves a clean and nice finish on the exterior side. Now that we're done with that, we will turn everything inside out through the opening slit of the lining, and we can now close the opening slit by stitching 1/16 of an inch, or as close as you can possibly can to the edge of the seam line. Finally, push the lining in the bag and iron all the seams and edges and wrinkles to have the best results. I definitely hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did. I would love to see what you guys create with this design, so when you're done creating yours, definitely post a picture or video of it and tag me or mention me on your post so then I can be notified about it. I am always happy to help, so comment down below if you guys have any questions or DM me on Instagram. I will be working on new projects, so keep on the lookout for the next video. And as always, thank you so much for watching and supporting me. It truly means the world to me, so thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!